to start by addressing something that I just wanted it to be in the video. For the last probably 4 or 5 years, I've worn a tie, and I've joked around about it being my Protestant collar and all that. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with wearing a tie or not wearing a tie. I started doing that because in my job, I was wearing a jacket and tie every day to work, and it felt wrong to dress down to come here, right? So that's what started that. I then just decided I thought I should keep doing that. It seemed like the right thing to do. I have been, on a kind of personal level, been gaining a lot of weight. I'm sure you've noticed. I'm at an all-time high of my weight, and my shirts don't button at the top anymore. And so I was at the store this last week and was going to buy a new shirt so that I could keep my tie on. And but I'm on a diet now, and I'm losing weight. So I thought that just seems like a waste of money to get a shirt that I can wear twice and then it won't fit anymore. So that got me thinking about why are you wearing a tie and how important is that? And I just decided I'm not wearing one I don't even wear the jacket anymore at work. So this is me dressing up these days. So I just thought, if you're watching these on YouTube and you're like, hey, he doesn't have his tie on, what's going on? I wanted that to be understood, but also by the actual people that I would care to know that is you guys. So just thought I would address that real quick. So I may or may not wear a tie in the future, but until my shirt's buttoned, I will not be wearing a tie.
But you did forget your coat today.
Do what? I did not forget. Oh, but I did forget my winter coat. I walked out, and it's not that cold out, so I got in the car and left, and then went to a gas station because the car was on E, and holy smoke, it's cold out. And then I barely made it from the parking lot to the building, so I'm like, I'm not sure how I'm going to get home. Yeah, so anyway, that's just foolish. But
And your neck is so cold
yeah.
without your tie.
Exactly. I don't have my little scarf on there. All right. Yeah, now I have a jacket to get home. That's right. I forgot. I was talking to Gary about wanting to get a new jacket because the one I've been wearing forever, I really like it, but I can't ever find another one. And he happened to find one and got it for me. So you're right. Now I have a jacket to get home. That worked out good. I forgot. I would have carried the dumb thing to the car. Not thinking about it. All right. So let me do 2 quick slides of review. How long did it take to load the animals on the ark? And we looked at this kind of extensively, and it shows that it was 7 days after God told them. He goes, I'm sending the flood in 7 days, and he starts bringing the animals. And so I've got on here 7 days. And I was talking to Mark after, and he made the comment that it seems somewhat unusual that God establishes like this pattern of a day of rest, but then has him working on these 7 days getting these animals loaded. And I thought, we're not explicitly told it's 7, but he seems to be loading them and then the flood hits. So I'm going to change that to 6 or 7 days. And the point of that is he could have finished loading on the 6th, and the morning of the 7th, here comes the flood. You know what I mean? So I'm not making a hard stand on either. I just thought that is an interesting thing. That fits that pattern. And he washed the world of everything starting on that 7th day, and potentially, I don't know. So it was just an interesting, thought I'd bring that up. Okay, Noah didn't know exactly when the flood was coming until God gave him that 7-day warning. God then brought the animals to the ark for Noah and his family to load them. When they finished, Noah and his family went in, and God shut the door. So we know that occurred on that 7th day, is them going in and him shutting the door, and the flood showed up. So the other one was, how could there be enough water to cover the mountains over the whole earth? In other words, that doesn't make sense. The volume of water needed to get higher than Everest it's not possible. It just doesn't make sense. And the thought of that is that we think the topography of the earth was not the same before and after the flood. When the great deep burst forth, which it talks about in the verse we looked at, it would have changed the landscape dramatically. Many of the high mountains could have formed from this movement of the earth. Again, tectonic plates shifting and pushing mountains higher and higher and higher, so that maybe at the highest mountain prior to the flood was, 3,000 feet of elevation or 2,000 feet of elevation, not 35,000 feet of elevation or whatever they are now at the highest. The other thing is the great depths of the ocean may not have been as deep before the flood as well. I think of the Marianas Trench, which is like, you can set Everest in it and there's room to spare by a significant amount, is my memory. So if that was much shallower, much more water would be risen above the surface that we currently have. But by opening up that Marianas Trench, it allowed that water to flow further down into the Earth's crust, getting it off of the land at a lower level than what it had been before. So combination of those things would explain that. All right. Whenever you have these long passages that are kind of a narrative story, it can be a little difficult to figure out how to approach that. So I've got 6 screens here that I want us to read through this, and it basically just picks it up when the flood starts all the way through to when the flood ends and they're coming off the ark. I just want to have us see that in one big sweep. 7 is what we looked at last time. We're not really going to revisit it. We'll pick it up in chapter 8, but I wanted you to see the whole thing in one shot. It's amazing how what we typically do is take small chunks. And let me just give you a quick talk about that. When we went through the life of Christ, I just am like, how did I never know that? Feeding of the 5,000 happens immediately following the death of John the Baptist. And they go away to the mountains to mourn over his death, and the crowd shows up. So they're like, and they had just finished a big, the disciples had just been on like a missionary type journey, and then come back, find out about his death. They go off by themselves to rest and mourn, and then this huge crowd shows up, and Jesus preaches all day long, and then they feed the 5,000, and then he sends them off into the water in the boat, and he goes off to pray. And then that night, he walks on water, and Peter gets out of the boat, and it's like, that's all in a 24-hour period? What? I had no idea. That's all. But you don't see that because we always study this, and then we study that, and then we study that. You know what I mean? We've separated all those pieces out. So I think it's helpful at times to just take a big chunk and see how it all flows together. And I think we'll make some discoveries a little bit in doing it that way. So if someone's willing, I'm going to have you guys read it, because otherwise I talk too much.
In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. And rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day Noah and his sons, Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Noah's wife and the 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kinds, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded them. And the Lord shut him in. The flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters prevailed and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, and all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on the dry land and those in whose nostrils was the breath of life, died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. And at the end of 150 days, the waters had abated. And in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. And the waters continued to abate until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent forth a raven. It went to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. Then he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground. But the dove found no place to set her foot, and she returned to him to the ark, for the waters were still on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark with him. He waited another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came back to him in the evening, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the waters had subsided from the earth. Then he waited another 7 days and sent forth the dove, and she did not return to him any more. In the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. In the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Then God said to Noah, "Go out from the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth." So Noah went out, and his sons and his wives and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by families from the ark.
I'm going to have you read one more thing. I just realized I didn't make a clean slide of this, so last one. Sorry, ignore the highlighting.
Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, "I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease."
Okay, so that is the story, kind of start to finish, from the time the flood came until they're off the ark. So this is the very end of last time. We ended with this: the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. So the first thing I want us to address is, how long was Noah on the ark? There's all this many months, and this month and this day, and then you have, and 7 days later this happened, and then 40 days later this happened, and there's 150. It gets pretty confusing. This was one of the more challenging things of putting this together, was kind of figuring that all out. So let's work through that a little bit, and I'm going to give you the answer up front, and then we'll build it after that. So this is Genesis 7:11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month. So, forgetting the year for a moment, second month, 17th day. That's when we're starting. The next thing we get at the very end, in the 601st year, so this is 1 year later, same second month, on the 27th day. So that's the two bookends. We're told it starts on the second month, 17th day of the 600th year of his life. That's what the reference of that is. And then you go 601st year, the following year, same month, second month, but now the 27th day. So what that gives us is a total of 1 year and 10 days. So that's where we're at. Now, let me address this. When you do math at 365 days for a year plus 10, that would give you 375, correct? The problem is the Bible doesn't use a 365-day calendar. It always uses 360. And it's like, why is the Bible wrong about something so obvious, right? Now, it's not, but it takes some thinking about. So this is taken from koinoniahouse.org, the article, the website listing there at the bottom. It says, virtually all ancient calendars were initially based on a 360-day year, 12 months of 30 days each. However, all calendars change in 701 BC. They all resort to adjustments and accommodate the current, I don't even know how to say that word, reckoning. Why? Something distinctive occurred, distinctive occurred in that year, 701 BC, to perturb the previous residents. It is interesting to catalog the biblical record of catastrophes. So what he's saying there, this would be Chuck Missler is whose website this is. He's passed away, but there's people that still operate the website for him. What they're saying is that the earth, when it was created, had a 360-day year, and it was divided equally into 12 30-day months. Something occurred in 701 BC that added 5 1/4 days. So that's why we have the leap year, and different calendars have done different things to make that all work. That's it, because it's not even 365, it's 365 1/4. So every 4th year you have to add a leap year day of February 29th, right? And that's not even really addressed in the scriptures. It's just all the calendars changed about that time. So, like, what happened? Well, I want you probably can't see these over here. So Noah's flood, if you kind of go back and do math, and I didn't double check their math because these are different kind of years than what I was thinking it was, but I think they're smarter than I am, so I'm going to use theirs. They believe Noah's flood occurred in October of 2484. The Tower of Babel, October of 1944, all BC years. So they're getting smaller because you're moving up to 0, birth of Christ. Sodom and Gomorrah, Exodus from Egypt, long day of Joshua, where the sun stood still, remember that? There's all these different things. They all happened on either October or March, and they have a 108-year interval. It's a weird pattern that you see. So the theory on this is that Earth and Mars would have had an orbit that brought them into very close proximity about every 108 years. They call it a resonant orbit, I believe is what it was called. But they kept getting closer and closer and closer, and in 701 BC, they got so close that it utterly changed the orbit of these two planets, and therefore Mars is no longer coming near us, and our orbit changed to 365 1/4. That's the theory. Now, that theory, while it may sound bizarre, there's actually quite a bit of stuff that demonstrates that may be true. Does it matter? Not really, but it does give you an answer as to why the Bible gives a 360-day year and every other ancient calendar did also. It's not like the Bible stood out in that way. Everything was a 360-day calendar. But we don't live in that world. So what happened? How did we add 5 1/4 days to our calendar? That's like bizarre, right? Well, this would give that answer to that. So let me show you this. We think this is about 701 BC, and this could be describing that event that took place a little bit. At that time, Josiah spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the sons of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and the moon in the valley of," however you say that, "and the sun stood still and the moon stopped." Sorry, this is the long day of Joshua. This is not 701. So that's one event. And the Bible describes that the sun stood still in the sky, which can't happen except for the fact that if this thing was going on where these planets are interacting in such a way that causes things to behave in a totally different way than normal, right? So that's one. Here's another one, Isaiah 38. This is the one we think that happened in 701. "This shall be a sign to you from the Lord, and the Lord will do this thing that he has promised. Behold, I will make the shadow cast by the declining sun on the dial of Ahazah or whatever, turn back 10 steps or 10 degrees is what it would be. So the sun turned back on the dial 10 degrees by which it had declined. Literally, the sun moved back 10 degrees on the sundial. That's 701, and from that point on, all world ancient calendars changed to 365 1/4 days. I don't know how to give you an exact answer to that, other than this theory that I've heard, which is that Mars and Earth came in such close proximity. Now, what's interesting, there's a bunch of stuff related to that. I won't go into all of it, but like Mars is the name of the god of war in the ancient other Roman cultures and stuff like that. And so the idea is every so often this cataclysmic event would happen, and the pagans thought of it as this god of war was coming to get them, so to speak, and so they called him Mars, and that's how that planet has gotten its name. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and that's something you can do some research on your own, but I just wanted to give you an answer as to why. So let me read this one last thing. Many European and Mediterranean-based peoples inherited the ancient Sumerian, Babylonian, however you say that, system of timekeeping, using 24 hours in a day, with hours of 60 minutes each and 60 seconds per minute. They are still today 360 degrees in a circle due to the ancient Babylonian year of 360 days. That all changed at the catastrophe of 701 BC. Now our year is about 365 1/4 days. So this is just another one of those types of things that indicate that. So the answer is 1 year and 10 days, but it's not 375, it's 370 days because it's based on a 360-day calendar. All right, timeline of the flood based on a 360-day year, 12 months, 30 days each. That's the timeline we're going to build. And there's not going to be a lot of questions and answers this time. You'll notice there's only a couple. What we're going to do is sort of build a timeline because I think it's going to be helpful. We're going to have 4 columns here. The day of the year, and this is based on Noah's life, so it'll be like year 600 of his life. The number of days since the previous thing that's been talked about, the total number of days that has elapsed, and then what event is being described. That's the 4 columns. Go ahead.
Can you clarify something to me?
Yep.
The year 600, you're saying is saying
Noah's birth.
Okay, not the beginning of the earth. Okay.
Yep. I think he was born in, I don't know, we looked at it before 1600 or something from the, yeah. Okay. So there's the 6, you do one of these as a way of illustrating this. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, 17th day, the flood starts, okay? So, year 600, month 2, day 17, there's no previous event, we're starting at day 0, the flood starts. So that's how it's gonna look as we walk our way through this. Okay. New material, we haven't been to chapter 8 yet. Now is we're gonna kind of blow through fairly quickly on chapter 8 because there's not a lot of, we're just gonna look and talk, just gonna move through it pretty quick. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. God made a wind blow over the earth and the waters subsided. There's an idea there that prior to, there would not have been crazy weather stuff because of this upper canopy of water created a more natural pressure around the whole earth, and that's why you had vegetation growing everywhere. It's why you find, frozen mastodons in Antarctica or somewhere, or Siberia or something, with leafy vegetation frozen in their mouth. They just instantly were frozen when this all changed. Well, that change is what then also brings about hurricanes and tornadoes and all this weather. And so it kind of indicates that here by saying he sent a strong wind. That would have been something that naturally would have happened if the flood had occurred the way we think it would have. Interesting that he brings that point out. There's no way for them to know that back then, but they now know that. We now know that based on what we can see. All right, the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were closed. So it stops raining and there's no more water bubbling up from below. The rain of the heaven was restrained and the waters receded from the earth continually. Again, think Marianas Trench opening up, this massive chasm and all this water draining off the land. So you have all this soft sediment over, say, North America. The Pacific Ocean opens up a much bigger chasm and all this water's draining off through the Grand Canyon, which didn't exist at the time, but because it's soft, as it's going, it's eroding and eroding and eroding, and it's working its way down and creating what we now see as the Great Canyon. And it probably happened over the course of a few months, not millions of years. It's the reason I showed you guys the video of Mount St. Helens. There's a canyon, it's a miniature version of the Grand Canyon up near Mount St. Helens, and they literally watched it happen. It happened very rapidly. There was tons of layers of soft sediment, then there was another explosion or eruption. A lake was let loose and it flooded down through there and just carved a channel through all this soft sediment. And now we see the Grand Canyon on smaller scale up there. We watched it happen in real time. And it's a perfect illustration of what would have happened after the flood. Go ahead.
I've seen the Grand Canyon at sunrise, which is breathtaking if you haven't had a chance. But there's all these different layers, and they were saying, how long each of it took.
Yeah.
Well, they were heavier sediments.
Right.
That layered up, and that's kind of what made all the different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, you can do that with a jar. Your kids probably did that in science class. You take rocks, sand, mud, blah, blah, blah. You put it all together in a quart jar and you shake it up with water in it, and then you set it down and it all settles out in sediments. What are we demonstrating? We're demonstrating rock strata. If you then did that and it's got, things that would then solidify over time, you did that with concrete mixed in there with it as well, wait a month, break the jar, and you've got a chunk in strata. It's the same kind of concept. That's something we got. Go ahead.
Oh, I've just got a question. In chapter 7,
Mhm.
it said the waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. You have
Cubits,
an
I
idea?
think we looked at before, is like 21.5 inches or something if you use an Egyptian cubit. It had to do with here to the tip of the finger, that was a cubit. So if you have 6 foot average height in your society, it's longer than if you have an average height of 5'5", you know what I mean? Because it's proportional. So there's multiple different cubits in the ancient world, but what we think that is around like 25 feet or something, I think, if I'm remembering the math. Like
25 feet.
something like that, yeah.
There's
Or
also
maybe 30 feet or something, I can't
a
remember.
thing for that too is they have the petrified forest,
Yeah,
which is trees that are pretty
Yeah.
much like stone, but I'm by a woods. My
Yeah.
trees decompensate.
right, they
after a few
decompose
years.
generally, but these didn't. What's interesting is when this thing happened up at Mount St. Helens, they send in loggers to cut the logs up that were floating on this lake, and it was burning up the chainsaws because they had already started petrifying. They then started sinking root end first into the mud, and now you can see petrified trees vertically through the layers. Now, how in the world do you have millions of years of layers and there's a tree growing through it? No, it doesn't work like that. Unless it's soft and they're heavy and they just sinks down into the mud, and then everything solidifies because of the minerals and stuff that's in the water that soaks into them. So people don't reject the Bible because it's not true. They don't reject it for lack of evidence. They reject it because they are sinful and they don't want to be answerable to God. It's just flat out, that's why. So why am I telling you all these things? So that you don't get deceived into thinking we don't have evidence on our side. We absolutely have evidence on our side. We have a very reasonable faith that we can't have if God doesn't do the miracle of opening our heart to it. So we're not smarter than they are. They just they love their sin, and they're not gonna accept truth no matter how much you give it to them. At the end of 150 days, the water had abated. So what does it mean that it is abated? So it says 150 days, and then it reiterates that by this. And in the 7th month, 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on Ararat. So it was I'm going to gray out the ones we're not looking at just so it's less cluttered, because it's really full by the time you get to the end. Notice it's the 2nd month, 17th, and then 7th month, 17th. Exactly 5 months. 30 days, 30 times 5, 150. The 150 is the 5 months. So we see that. Ark came to rest. Okay. And the waters continued to abate until the 10th month. So from the 7th month, 17th day to the 10th month. In the 10th month, and on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. So what did it mean that it abated? It just meant that it had come down far enough that Ararat was sticking up high enough that the boat could become lodged on it and sit there. But all this, 10-month first day, now multiple mountains are sticking up out of the water. Go ahead.
So was Ararat a mountain they were familiar with already?
Don't know. I don't know that we have any reference to it other
So
than
we don't
this.
know if it's anywhere even close to where Noah started out.
There is a Mount Ararat, and it's in Turkey, and we would have thought that they would start close to where civilization started, which would be in Israel, that area. And Turkey is not very far from that, and they could have drifted from Israel up into Turkey and then stopped there. That makes about right 150 days, 5 months of drifting. There's no motor, you're just, so you could drift that far in 5 months.
And there was no wind, obviously, either.
Well, there would have been during the collapse of the waters and the upheaval of the waters, it would have been, just unbelievable. Yeah. Potentially 30, 40, 50 foot waves and just all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah. All right. And then it says this, at the end of 40 days, so 40 days from what? 40 days from 10th month, first day. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent forth a raven. It went to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. That's all we know about the raven thing. And that sounds to me like it didn't come back, it was just gone. The idea you'll see next is a dove. Ravens are kind of scavengers, and they could have eaten a lot of different things, where a dove is very specific in its diet. It didn't find anything to eat or anything, and so you'll find that the dove comes back, the raven does not initially here. Then he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground. But the dove found no place to set her foot, and she returned to him to the ark, for the waters were still on the face of the whole earth. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean there was nothing sticking out, because we've already been told that the mountains are sticking up. It's simply saying there's no vegetation has come back, or there's not, you know, that kind of thing. It's not that there's no anything sticking out. We were already told that it is. So he put out his hand and took her and brought her back with him into the ark. So I think this is what happened here. We're not explicitly told, but notice there's no time duration between the raven and the dove. I've always thought it was 7 days. He did the raven, waited 7 days, did the dove, waited 7 days, did another dove. You know what I mean? It doesn't say that. He sent forth the raven and he sent forth the dove. I mean, he may have sent the raven out and then he took the dove and put the dove out. They would have had different diets. Maybe it's a test of what's going on, and I don't know. But my point is, we're not given a time interval, but every other event is given a time interval. So I don't think there is one. I think on month 11, day 10, that's 40 days later, okay? So you see how it's 223 plus 40 is 263? That's where I'm getting these numbers. The reason I've done that is some things are 40 days later, others are year, month, day, and I want to keep track of that all the way through. We're not given the month and the day that he sent forth the raven, but we know it's 40 days after this other thing we are given. Do you see how that's working? Okay. Noah sent out a raven and a dove. That's the event. Okay. Now he waits another 7 days, and again he sends forth the dove out of the ark. Now, when it says another 7 days, maybe that's an indicator that he waited 7 days between the raven and the dove. Possibly, don't know. And the dove came back to him in the evening, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So now she has found vegetation growing and takes the leaf and comes back. So Noah knew that the water had subsided from the earth. So here, now we're at 11 months, 17 days, or 270 days total. The dove came back. Now, these events related to the dove and the raven could be off slightly, right? And maybe instead of being 270, it'd be 277, because these two went out 7 apart. It's kind of irrelevant, but that's possible. When we get back to the point where they're coming out of the ark and stuff, that's not in question because we're explicitly told that. The only thing we're not really given enough detail to know for certain is the when in the sequence did the raven, the dove, and the dove happen? When did that occur? And I could be off by 7 days, but it's not that big a deal. All right. Then he waited another 7 days and sent forth the dove, and she did not return to him anymore. So now we see he sends it out, the dove does not come back. We are at month 11, day 24. So if you think of month 2 as February, so February 17th to November 24th, approximately, because I know we have a different, 30 and 31 day calendar thing, but it's about that. Just it's for you to be able to think that through timeline. Proportional. And then it says this, in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day. So January 1, right? That's what we would call that. The waters were dried from the earth. Now, I want you to catch this. Think of it like January 1st, okay? The dove does not come back. It's January 1st, and he knows it. Now what happens? Noah removed the cover from the ark, looks, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. So the waters dried up. That was 36 days, maybe 29 days if we add an extra 7 for the raven and the dove going out separately, but in the neighborhood of 30 days before the waters were shown to be dried up completely. He knew they were dried. He didn't do anything. He just sat there in the ark for another 30-something days waiting for what's next. Then he takes the cover off, he looks, yep, it's dry, okay? In the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. So what that's saying is the water's gone, but it's a sloppy mess, right? It looks like my front yard did on Saturday or whatever, when there's just rain and you go to get the mail and you're sinking to the ankle type. That's what it's describing, okay? So, 57 days later, we go from January 1 all the way out to February 27th, if we're thinking of it in our calendar numbers. It's 57 days later, the earth had dried out. Where are they at? They're still in the ark. Back in November, it's dried out. The dove doesn't come back. You add 36 and 57, 90 days later? They spend 3 more months in the ark after the earth's dried out. What are they waiting on, right? What are you doing? Then God said to Noah, that's what he's waiting on. He doesn't know what to do. He's just, family's like, let's get out of here. No, we gotta wait, let's wait. The Lord will tell us when it's time to go. And he's not like, what are you doing? Get out of there. He doesn't, he just, okay, now it's time. And now he sends them out. Why? Because now it's dried out. Then God said to Noah, go out from the ark. So it's the 601st year, it's the 2nd month, it's 27th day. It started on the 17th day. So that's how we know it's 360 plus 10 extra. There's your 370 days. And God told Noah to go out from the ark. And that's the timeline thing you have on the back of that complete one. So what lesson can we learn from the timeline of the flood? My point is, it's there for a reason. He didn't go into all that detail for no reason. God's not big into wasting words. What are we supposed to take from that? Let me give you something to think as you're thinking about that. Epic of Gilgamesh. We discovered this a while back. It's these ancient tablets, and it describes this Epic of Gilgamesh. In that, there's a story of this Gilgamesh character, and he goes and he meets, he has this gentleman. I don't have any idea how to pronounce this guy's name. It's the second word in this line, or third word. Utopa Fashimtamai. I don't know how you say it. We're going to call him Bill. So I'm just going to use the word Bill so I can read through it clearly. Okay, I want you to see this. There is no direct answer to the question in the text. We're not told how long it lasts. The storm that triggered the flood lasted 6 days and 7 nights. It rained for 6 days and 7 nights in the Gilgamesh epic, and it's a global flood that kills everything in 7 days. 6 days, 7 nights. On that day, the ship runs aground on Mount whatever and is stranded for another 6 days and 7 nights. So we're talking 2 weeks. He floods the entire world, and it's dried out, and they're stranded there for 14 days total. Okay? On the 7th day, a dove is released, but returns, unable to find land. Then this Bob, we'll call him, says, I waited, then I brought out a swallow and set it free. Now there's no telling how long that interval was, an hour, or a day, or a week. They're telling us here in this person that's answering this question. The scenario repeats itself with a raven which finds land. Now what's interesting is the similarities. If you guys have played the game Telephone, or there's another game we play right now, I take a word, the word is boat, and I'm supposed to draw a boat, and then I close it and I hand it to the person next to me, and they open it up, and they don't know what the word is, they can see the picture. And because I'm a bad artist, they think it looks like a banana, yeah, I don't know. So they write banana, and then they hand it to the next person, and the next person says banana. Oh, and they have to draw a banana, and they draw that, and the next person goes, my word, that's a terrible canoe. And so then they write canoe, right? And you get to the end, and sometimes it's totally off, and sometimes it's funny how it'll go all the way back around, and the canoe, I think that's a canoe, okay, boat. It ends up back where it started. That's what you see with these stories of the flood. They're literally all over the world. There's a story of a universal flood. And they all have these very similar, there's a dove released, there's a raven released, there's only a few people on the boat, everybody's killed. All this stuff, it's all there. What it is word of mouth. The story gets told, the story gets told, the story gets told, and it keeps changing slightly. But there's an underlying truth. So if we want to know what actually happened, you go and read it in the scriptures. There's a more accurate account. Why? Because we know that the Bible is true, but also because it matches reality. You're not going to flood the world in 14 days and have it dry out. A year? That actually probably fits, right? The boat. I showed you guys a picture of this. The Epic of Gilgamesh, his boat is a cube. It's literally a perfect cube. Think about dropping a cube in a lake and then hitting it with waves. Everything is like sausage after about a day. Do you know what I'm saying? It's rolling and rolling and rolling. But that's not what happened. Noah built a modernly engineered, perfect ship-going vessel that we now know is perfect dimensionally. He had no idea. Nobody had ever built a boat like that before. But if God wanted them to actually survive, he would say, hey, build it this long with this width and this height proportion so you guys will make it through this. And they did. So everything about Noah's Ark kind of actually matches up with the reality. And these others have a lot of similarities, but they don't match reality. So to me, that's one reason why the timeline matters. The time frame given in the scripture is a realistic timeline of events. This is unlike other flood myths. When I say myths, by the way, myth or mythic is a word we usually use to describe things that are untrue. The point is, a mythic story can have truth in it, but is not meant to be literal. So to say that it's mythic is not to say that it's completely false, it's just not wholly accurate, but there are truthful things within it. The other thing I think we can learn from this timeline is that Noah waited for God's command before he leaving the ark. I had never noticed that. He's in there for 90 days after he knows it's dry. That's pretty remarkable. What are you waiting on? Well, he's waiting on God to tell him what to do next. He has no idea. He's been just doing what God told him. We don't have the ability today to have God come to us and say, do this. But I still think there's a correlation here for us. We can, through prayer, through seeking wise counsel, we can try to follow the direction of God in events of our life. Should I marry so-and-so? Well, we're given principles in the scripture. Don't marry someone who's a non-believer. There's things like that. So you can take what you do know to be true from God's word. You can pray to him about that. You can seek the wise counsel of others. And you can come to what I think this is what God is leading me to do. You can also, I don't think he wants me to, but I'm going to anyway. Right? You can do that. And Noah is this perfect example. I don't mean perfect as in he did it perfectly. I just think it's a great example of we need to sometimes just sit and wait on the Lord to make it clear what our next move should be. I have had that happen in my life. When I was making the transition from my former job to the one I'm in now, nothing logically about that kind of made sense in terms of making that transition, but it just seemed overwhelmingly clear on other areas that that's what I needed to do, but I wasn't willing to do it because of fear. I was too afraid to make that transition. And then I'm listening to this message, and they're talking about the verse that says, I do not give you the spirit of fear, but of love and joy and sound mind. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It's really clear what I'm supposed to do, but I'm too afraid to do it. So the Lord used that passage to help me see, no, you need to move. You know what I want you to do, but you're just too afraid to do it. And I made the decision that day, talked to Brenda, and she's like, good, I thought that's what we should do. I've been waiting on you to figure that out, as a gracious and godly wife. And it has worked out. But my point is, there's a part of me that was waiting on the Lord to make it clear, and there was also that can get tainted by fear and things like that. And when the timing was right, he brought a verse to mind that I had known for years, and it just, okay, let's go. I figured out on Saturday and called my boss Monday morning at like 9 o'clock. So once I felt like this is what I'm supposed to do, there was go. So anyway, that's probably a bad example, but it's a little more difficult when he's not coming and talking out loud, is the point I'm saying. Okay, let's move through this last section real quick. Then God said to Noah, go out from the ark, you and your wife and your sons and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals and creeping things that creeps on the ground, that they may swarm on the earth, be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with them. Every beast, every creeping thing, every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by families from the ark. So it wasn't mass panic coming out. The 2 dogs went out, the 2 cats went out, the 2 cows went out, and they went out by families, it's saying.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Families, does that mean some of the animals already had babies?
Oh,
Made
I don't
me
know.
think of that,
I didn't either.
Yeah,
I don't know. Potentially, I don't know.
yeah.
Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. First thing he does coming off. And he took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings to the Lord. We talked about this. Why does he take 7? And does he take 7 animals or 7 pairs? And there's really not a good solid answer to that. It's a very strange wording in the Hebrew that makes it hard to figure it out. Some would make the argument that you're to bring 7 animals, 3 pairs and an extra. The extra is for this. They just sacrifice the 7th one. Now they have 3 pairs of clean and a pair of the non-clean. Why? Because they're going to be burning a lot of these clean animals, and they're going to be eating a lot of those. So they need that population to grow much quicker than the other. I don't know if it's that or if there's 7 pairs. Don't know. It's not really that relevant in the detail on that. But the point is, this is why he had them bring them, because they're going to sacrifice immediately after they come off the ark. And if they only have 2, they just made something extinct. So, and when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, don't hear that and think barbecue. That's not what that's a reference to. What he's referring to, the pleasing aroma of obedience, of worship, he's smelling the heart, which is a little unusual, but it's a word play. They knew that's what the Lord had expected from them. That was established in the garden after the first sin. He killed the animal in sacrifice, and then Cain and Abel are offering offerings, and because they had been taught by their parents to do that, obviously. So they know to do this, and God sees their act of obedience and worship, and that's pleasing to him. The Lord said then in his heart, so this is the last question. What's the significance of these promises? There's probably quite a few things, but I will never again curse the ground because of man. He's not going to wipe out the earth that way ever again. 4 is a connection. It's because is the word you could put there. Why? Why is he not going to do that? Because the intentions of man's heart is evil from his youth. In other words, it didn't solve the sin problem. I think it solved the Nephilim problem. I think it solved that issue. That will come back as we looked at in the time of the Exodus, but on a much smaller scale. So he's not trying to eradicate sin with the flood. the first thing he says when they get off the boat, I'm never gonna do this again, because, I mean, your sinful desires from youth, I mean, this is just who you people are. I'm never gonna do this again. He's not regretting what he's done here, he's just making that statement. Nevertheless, neither will I ever strike down every living creature as I have done. He's never gonna wipe everything out and start over again the way he's done here. And then this is the big one. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, planting and harvesting, seasons, spring and fall, think of it that way, cold and heat, winter, summer, then summer and winter, he says that specifically, day and night, they shall not cease. I'm not trying to be political with this answer, but despite the current hysteria, there will always be winter and summer, planting and harvest until the Lord's return. Right now, we're being told that with the whole climate change thing, that we are going to, all burn up and all these other things. And God's saying, no, you're always gonna have planting and harvesting. You're always gonna have cold and hot. You're always gonna have night and day. You're always gonna have summer and winter. There's another one though, you may not have heard of this, but it's becoming more and more known about. I'll end on this. There's a thing that they have been able to determine they think happened in the past. They believe that there's a polar shift that occurs periodically on the earth. The guy that I have seen talk about this most is actually, like astrophysicist type guy, so he's not some dingbat like me or something. He's talked about this, given lots of evidence for it. Days are actually changing their length, like by the millisecond differences, but there are day length of 24-hour days are shortening. I think it's shortening, not letting longer. The magnetic pole is no longer at the North Pole. It has shifted, and then it shifted, and now it's really moving fast off to the one side. So what did that mean? Well, if that event were to occur the way he's describing it, it literally like flips the world in the way it rotates, and catastrophic, like the flood type of event. And he refers to the last one of these that happened as Noah's flood. He's not a Christian, but he's referenced that's the time frame that this is how far ago it happened the last time. And his point is and we didn't know what happened, and we called it Noah's flood. But the point is, he's expecting that to happen fairly soon, like in the next 5, 10, 15 years. That everything on the planet would be kind of wiped out and we start over. I don't think it's going to happen. This verse makes it pretty clear that's not going to happen. So my point is, when I hear those kind of things from him, I don't care how smart he is, he may even be correct. Do you see what I'm saying? 2035, it's happening. Okay, well, he must not going to be here by then, because this tells me that's never going to, the way we are right now isn't going to stop. So I don't give much worry or thought to that. You know what I'm saying?
Until the Lord returns.
When the Lord returns, then there is this kind of catastrophic
So
thing.
he could return in 15 years.
Yeah. We have and we'll be gone 8 years from now. 7 years ahead of that. So here's my point. I think that with everything that's happening in the world, that verse is pretty meaningful to me. I don't care how all the fear mongering kind of rolls on. It's okay. We're okay. We're okay. All right. Let me do this. I'm going to close this in prayer. I'll throw that back up if you want to reference it, although you have a copy now. But dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for just the things like the dimensions of the ark, the number of days of the flood, these little things we just read right past, and yet they add such validity to the reality of the story being communicated, unlike these historical recreations or retellings of these events that have so many flaws in them. We're grateful that we know that we can trust you and we can trust your word. Help us to communicate that to others that we care about. Help them to see the trustworthiness of your word as well. And I just pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.